communication about how we manage our work needs to be formalized and become part of the discipline of communication that we have with each other to make sure that everybody's on the same page all of the time.
The question is from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Paul from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Ricky from Thinking Focus.
And the question is, how do I create a high-performing hybrid workforce?
That was easy to say, wasn't it?
Easier than I was expecting it to be, which is why I slowed down a little bit because I thought I'm going to get this wrong.
I thought you did very well. So this is obviously a hot topic right now in terms of the world is considering, do we go all in? Do we go half in? Or do we stay as we are? And I think there is a tendency to be probably somewhere in between that in terms of the hybrid workforce. So what's that going to mean? What's that going to look like in terms of managing a team in that environment? What are the things that they should be looking for then, Paul?
Isn't it the same as managing any workforce? I mean, why is it different?
Well, in reality, I don't think it is, but I think there are some subtleties, some nuances that we do need to account for. You know, we do have to consider, you know, how do we involve everybody? You know, particularly when we're trying to move forward as a team. How do we ensure that, you know, we don't make decisions that you don't have a voice in just because you happen to be at home? So how do we combat some of those things? So, you know, I suppose, you know, from our perspective, we would always go, well, there are some key ingredients here. One is, let's be clear. Let's have some clarity about what the team goals are, what the expectations are as a team, and what that means for you as an individual. So I think that's going to be still the same. You know, all teams need clarity, don't they?
Yeah, but a lot of them just kind of work it out between them. They never stop and go, oh, hang on, guys, what is it we're actually trying to do here? So there's got sort of an assumed clarity. And the shocking thing is how often we actually do get it right without you know, consciously talking about it. That's going to be harder with a hybrid workforce. So maybe it's something that as a manager, you need to force the issue and go, we are going to have these points in time when we are going to check in and go, are we all aligned to the higher purpose here? Do we all actually know exactly who's doing what and why we're doing it and what the timelines are?
Totally agree. And I think, you know, clearly we've all adapted to working from home, working in a remote way. You know, we understood how it operated. Like you said, we kind of made it work when we all were together in one location. But actually, maybe there's an opportunity as we move into a new phase to actually set and agree some expectations how we're going to operate as a team so that we can almost preempt some of those areas where we know that perhaps we struggled in the past. We can learn from some of that stuff. But also, actually, when we do have, you know, this kind of split team, some in, some out, how do we make sure that we've got a process for making decisions, that we've got a process for agreeing a way forward, that we do that in a way that is respectful of each other so that we're not having the meeting after the meeting that excludes you because you're at home, because the meeting stopped, the team session stopped, and because, you know, me and, say, Richard, one of our business partners, we have a conversation that continues and you're now excluded from that. How do we protect everybody within that in a way that we don't feel like things are happening behind our back in this kind of dark arts form?
And that means we're going to have to formalize quite a lot of that level of communication, because quite a lot of the organizational communication is informal in businesses. We do it in the corridor. Who's doing this? Who's doing that? Oh, have you finished this bit yet? Oh, great. Can you help me with this? All of those kind of conversations tend not to happen in the meetings.
Well, the water cooler, the smoking shed,
the coffee machine. No, that is that kind of stuff that goes on. So actually, with a hybrid workforce, one of the things we're saying is there's quite a lot of that style of communication. The communication about how we manage our work needs to be formalized and become part of the discipline of communication that we have with each other to make sure that everybody's on the same page all of the time.
Yeah, we don't want to leave questions, and we certainly don't want to leave people thinking that goes, well, how did we arrive at that decision? How do we arrive at that outcome? Because I don't remember having the conversation. Oh, yeah. You know, Paul and I agreed that yesterday and we're moving forward. And you go, well, hang on a minute. There's some views and opinions that I think might be important within that. So I think that comes to, probably making sure that we have some understanding in terms of our expectations about dependability. We can rely on each other, not just to do what we said we were going to do, but also to observe some of those disciplines, like you said, in terms of updating communication systems, whether that be the project management tools we're using, CRM tools we're using, whatever it might be. But we need to make sure that there are robust systems and processes to make sure that everybody's in the loop. That needs to be in the loop. Not everybody, but everybody that needs to be.
Yeah. And I think the system stuff becomes really important when you have a hybrid workforce, because you're going to have to rely much more on the data that you've got in front of you. You can't sort of, again, be informal and just double check. You can't just call across the office to somebody who's not there. And I suppose you could just jump on Teams and ask them a question or ask through chat, but then that's a highly disruptive way of working. So actually it's better if you can create a culture where you can, if you're using CRM, you can look up something on behalf of a customer and know what you're looking at is the latest information.
Yeah.
Or if you're using a task management system, you can look at it and go, I actually know where we are on all these tasks. I don't need to ask any questions because I trust the team have updated it accordingly, which for a lot of teams is a massive cultural shift.
Oh, it will be. And of course, the same excuses will play out. It goes, yeah, well, we're too busy. I got distracted. I moved on to something and, I got called into another conversation or another meeting that meant I just forgot to do it. Well, that forgetting to do it means that you've just wasted a heap of time for potentially a customer, for your colleagues, and for others as they go in search of the information that you could have put in a relatively short space of time.
And I think some of that is about people not understanding. I mean, again, I've seen this with sales groups where salespeople are, sometimes resistant of the CRM systems they're given. And having been a salesperson in a past life, I kind of get that because I was probably one of those people to a greater extent. But it's not kind of understanding how that data is therefore being used to make decisions that help me. And I think, as I got more senior in the organization and started to use the data and then becoming very frustrated that the data wasn't accurate, I started to understand why I needed to do it. So as leaders, part of the responsibility, if you're going to have a hybrid workforce, is to help people make connections with, look, the reason we want you to update these tasks in real time or update the tickets or update the CRM entries is not because we don't trust you. It's not because we want to manage your workflow. It's about having a single view of what's going on so that we can leave you alone to get on with the work.
Yeah, absolutely. But again, it's like everything. It's not just tell each other or tell us what you want. It's also help us to understand why this is important, how it helps, how it contributes, how it actually saves time in the long run, even though it might not feel that way as you're making your notes at the end of a project meeting or at the end of a sales call, whatever it might be. So I think, understanding that why is a really important thing and how that why relates to the bigger why that we have as a team. And I think making sure that's been either established or re-established to make sure that we're all on the same page. We all understand what's the guiding factors that govern our decision making. Does it align to that team purpose? We need to make sure that is both clear and that I also have an individual connection to that team purpose. I understand the part I play in all of this, i.e., I know why I do what I do. I know why these notes are important. I know why that other people will value and use them in a way that moves everybody forward.
So again, if you're managing a hybrid workforce and you want it to be a high-performing hybrid team, and I'm going to say team as opposed to workforce because I think it's probably more relevant if you've got a group that you're working with. You are going to have to formalize some of these conversations. You're going to have to make sure that you're not leaving it to chance and that there's an active conversation happening about, what are we doing and why are we doing it? And let's make sure all of us have the same level of understanding at all times. And I don't mean daily or maybe not even weekly. Maybe for the task-based stuff, that's relatively frequently. But the purpose stuff, the bigger picture stuff, can often be left for long periods of time without talking about it. And I think to create a high performance workforce, you almost need to go and say, well, at least once a quarter, we're having this conversation. Even if it's a conversation that takes 10 minutes and everybody goes, yeah, I get it. It hasn't changed. I'm still happy. You've got to formalize that and do it regularly.
And you often use the term transparency. If we're transparent about all of these things, then nobody's left with that. Well, what does that mean for me? Nobody's left with, well, I didn't realize. Remove ambiguity, remove excuses, make sure everybody's clear, but also create an environment where actually they feel safe to say when they're not. So when I'm not sure what this means, when I'm not sure what this means for the bigger picture, I'm not sure how this decision is going to play out against that, give them the permission to voice that, to share that, because I think, we talk about psychological safety, for example, a lot in teams. And actually, I think you're going to have to work a little bit harder with psychological safety, because you're going to have people that are isolated, left thinking things that perhaps might not be right. They might be built on lots of assumptions. They might be, concerned or worried about things. So actually, we need to create this transparent view of the world where they feel confident and able to say what they're thinking, so that they can actually add a greater value to the team as a whole. Because it might be they're thinking the one thing that's going to trip you up and nobody else is talking about it.
Yeah, and I think that means as a manager, you have to get really comfortable with talking about feelings. How do you feel about this? What are you worried about? What are you concerned about? If what you're looking for is just good news feedback, it's going to be really hard in a hybrid workforce to create high performance. You kind of need to get to the bottom of all those concerns and worries, most of which will be from misunderstanding, but some of them might be real. But without unpicking them and understanding them, you can do nothing about it. And in the office with people in front of you, you can kind of go, oh, that person doesn't seem to be right, or that person doesn't seem to be being effective at the moment, or there's something on their mind. But if you've got a hybrid workforce, it could be a while before you're physically in a room with them, at which point the damage is done. So you've got to somehow get those conversations onto the table early and consistently. And that comes back to that transparency thing of, well, actually, we create a team culture where we can talk about all of this stuff without fear, without shame. We're just open and honest about it. And that doesn't mean, by the way, that you then have to be accepting of it, or you have to accept poor performance or worries or fears. I'm not saying that. So, I think one of the big misunderstandings of psychological safety is it sort of some kind of fluffy, woke, let's not upset anybody. For me, it's not. It's very much about saying we can have the bigger, open, but sometimes tough conversations that we need to have as a team, so that we can move forward together at speed.
I agree entirely. I think without feeling safe, then, feeling like I can share, good, bad, or indifferent, means that I will find strategies to either sugarcoat the message. I will find strategies to avoid sharing the message. And often that in the long run means that we lose time, we lose money, we might lose access to resources, for example, in terms of getting stuff done. So I think actually psychological safety is a much more efficient way of working, and it's a much more inclusive way of working. So people feel like their views are valid. Yes, we're not saying that underperformance or mistakes aren't we're not going to deal with them. What we are going to do is we're going to learn from them, and we're going to work out how, we don't repeat them, and work out what we can do differently next time. So that's a much more efficient way of dealing with issues. And I think your point around being good receivers of bad news is fundamental to that, because if we're not, we're just going to drive those messages underground, and they will surface much more serious later. With much bigger consequences attached to them.
And so where this has kind of led my head to go, sort of hearing you talk, is to think about, well, okay, if you're managing a hybrid team, then you need to really start to think about, how do I utilize the time, when the team is together? When I bring in these people together, whether it's for a meeting or whether it's for a workshop, or whether it just happens to be the day when everybody's in the office, because I'm going to have to condense all the stuff that used to happen naturally as people getting to know each other and Sort of the social, what I call the social communication that goes on, the stuff that's not about the business, it's not about work, but provides the glue and the trust that underpins all of that. That may have to happen in really condensed periods of time.
Yeah.
I might only have a meeting a month or a meeting a quarter where everybody's together, and that's where those bonds are going to come together and work. And if I get those bits right, then actually when we're on the road or when we're working from home, it won't matter as much because we're still a team and we still know each other and we'll still have each other's back. But if I don't get those bits right, then these people aren't my team. They're just people I happen to work with. And it's much easier, therefore, to blame or disconnect or not want to help or to be, slightly more selfish about your work. So that's a big thing on the manager. If you're managing a workforce like that, how are you going to use that time when people are together?
I think that's a fantastic point, because the temptation as a manager will all be about, we're together for a period of time. We're going to shoehorn as much as we possibly can around tasks, around process, around improvement, around dealing with issues, around solving problems, that will forget that social aspect of what it means to be part of the team. And you will get the outcome that you've just described, which is we're just a group of people that happen to work together. That social aspect is the bit that when they come together, they will work out what the issues are and naturally solve problems when they're away from this team environment. They won't just wait till they're together to do those things. They'll do it naturally in the way that they work together. But they can't do that if they don't understand who does what, how they operate, how they like to work, who's got what strengths, who's got, what knowledge that I can tap into. That comes from socialization of who we are and what we do and how we do it.
So I think I just sort of rounding this off, I think what we're saying is that actually, it's quite possible. In fact, it's very feasible to have a high-performing hybrid team, but you are going to have to do some things differently. You're going to have to formalize some of the communication around clarity and purpose and the cadence of all those things. You're going to have to create a culture of dependability where people understand the relevance of the data that we collect, the systems, the way that we do tasks, the way that we make decisions, so that we create an inclusive environment, so that people can rely on the information in front of them. And we're going to have to work on the safety. When we bring people together, we are going to have to do things that help them bond and form as a team. Because if we leave it just to the natural course and they only see each other once, once a month or once a quarter, you're not going to get the benefits of a team. You're going to have a group of just, individuals all working for the same person, not a team united on the same outcome.
Yeah, I agree. I think they've got to build inclusivity in a standard. They've got to make sure that even between those together periods, if you like, that actually they do reach out for people's views and opinions, particularly on things that are relevant and important, not for the sake of it, clearly, but where it's relevant, important to the goal and where we're trying to get to. Because if they don't, then they'll undermine that safety aspect. They'll undermine those things. So reach out for more than just task-based stuff. Reach out for involvement and inclusion.
To find out how Thinking Focus can unlock the potential within your organization, go to www.thinkingfocus.com, where you'll discover more about the work we do, helping our clients increase productivity and enable change.